Support for I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere comes from MX Publishing, with the largest catalog of new Sherlock Holmes books in the world. New novels, biographies, graphic novels, and short story collections about Sherlock Holmes. Find them at mxpublishing.com.
And listeners like you who support us on Patreon or Substack, sign up for exclusive benefits at patreon.com/ihearofsherlock or ihearofsherlock.substack.com.
I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, Episode 301, Sherlock Holmes, Leviathan.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became astronomer.
In a world where it's always 1895, it's I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we interview authors, editors, creators, and other prominent Sherlockians on various aspects of the great detective in popular culture.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
I'm Bill Curtis. This is I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Now, here are your hosts, Scott Monty and Bert Wolder.
Well, thank you very much, Bill Curtis, as always. And welcome, everyone, to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Bert Wolder.
And Bert, are you feeling a little bit of levity today?
Yes, I'm about 6 inches off my chair, actually, rising straight forward up to the ceiling.
Is that a rocker, by any chance?
No, it's because I put a lot of hot air into my pants pockets today.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, you're either full of hot air or off your rocker, or in this case, both.
Both, yes.
Fantastic.
Both.
Well, we have a wonderful program ahead of us today. We're going to be speaking with writer Mike Barron, author of the new graphic novel Sherlock Holmes, Leviathan. It'll be a wide-ranging conversation, and we'll talk about his view of Sherlock Holmes and the world of mystery and storytelling. Lots to do with storytelling. And, of course, we will also have our usual features of Sherlockian news, a chance of listening, and, of course, everyone's favorite quiz show, Canonical Couplet, where we give you 2 lines of poetry and ask you to identify which Sherlock Holmes story we're talking about. And I suppose if we play our cards right, the winner for this Canonical Couplet will receive a copy of Mike Barron's new book. So, perfect. Stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, if you'd like to support the show, or if you'd like to make sure you have the show notes, just go to SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. You can sign up for Patreon or Substack updates, as well as email updates directly from us. You can support us for as little as $1 a month. All of our supporters get the same thing. All of our supporters are eligible for a drawing a month. At the end of every month, we put everyone's name into a barrel and pick it out. Or is it a barrel, or do we use the spinning prize wheel? I forget.
Actually, it's a barrel, but the problem is we didn't take the pickles out. And I don't want to be the one to select the winner anymore.
I was wondering what that smell was. We do not put everyone's name in a barrel. Everyone who is a supporter of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere can listen to the show ad-free and receive bonus content. That's what it is. It's over on Trifles that everyone's eligible for a drawing. So scratch that. But we do have some news for you with regard to being a supporter starting in 2025, season 19, if you can believe it. We are going to be moving the Sherlockian news over to part of our bonus content. We'll focus still on the interviews, and we'll continue with Madeline's A Chance of Listening segment, and of course our quiz. But we'll do news and outtakes and other commentary there in our bonus content. Something a little extra for our supporters, so get ready for that in 2025. It's news. News you can use from the Sherlockian world. What do we have in the headlines this time around, Bert?
Well, there are still subscriptions yet available. I know you're looking, friends, you're looking at the calendar and saying, my goodness, it's the middle of December soon. It will be Christmas Day. But yes, there's still time if you act quickly. Hurry up right now to subscribe to the Baker Street Journal for 2024 because the extra added incentive, of course, the BSJ's Christmas Annual for 2024 is only available to subscribers. And it is all about the 5 Orange Pips, the oldest Sherlockian society, bar none. It actually predates the Baker Street Irregulars. Gather round the sundial. A night with the 5 Orange Pips is a selection of papers that have been edited by the one and the only Rebecca Romney.
Oh, lovely. Well, Rebecca is a foremost scholar on rare books and has been with us here on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere before. You may recognize her name from Pawn Stars, as she was the resident book expert there. She's a member of the Baker Street Irregulars, and the only way you can get this Christmas Annual, as you said, Bert, is through a subscription. What happens is people end up coveting the Christmas Annual later on, and it's very, very difficult to find. So this is the only way, or mostly the only way that you're going to be able to get it. So that is good. Well, also, Jenny Payton has news from YouTube. Jenny Payton has long been a Sherlockian who has cataloged all kinds of things on first VHS and then disc and, of course, now across the internet. Specifically regarding video. Well, she found a series of Sherlock Holmes radio stories from South Africa. It was broadcast by Springbok Radio from 1979 to 1985 with Graham Armitage as Sherlock Holmes and Kerry Jordan as Watson. There's 12 hours of programs in the stories of Sherlock Holmes. And some of them are canonical, and most of them are not. But it might make for an interesting listen for people who enjoy Sherlock Holmes on audio.
And that's most of us. And you can plan ahead, too. Another interesting news item is it's not too soon to start thinking about March. March 21 to 22nd, 2025, will be the 10th Holmes, Doyle, and Friends Conference in Dayton, Ohio, thanks to the work of the Agra Treasures. It's the Holmes, Doyle, and Friends Conference. It's going to be held at the Quality Dayton Airport Inn, not the average Dayton Airport Inn, which is next door. This is at the Quality Dayton Airport Inn in Dayton, Ohio. Registration is now open. You can find the link in the show notes. I've already signed up. So if you would like to avoid me, you can... You can begin planning which side of the conference room you want to huddle over in the hopes that I'm not going to see you. But it's a great conference, and I'm looking forward to it already.
It is. It certainly is. Quality Dayton Inn. They put the K in quality. Well, if you missed the BSI Trust lecture that was held back in September, given by Matthias Bostrom, you missed a good one. Matthias talked about Charles Hantz, who was the managing director of the Associated Press for many years, and how it was because of Charles Hantz's columns, which were syndicated across the United States, that the BSI became fairly well known in those days, in the 1940s. It is now available, the lecture that is now available through the BSI Trust website, and I think it links specifically to the University of Indiana digital archive there. You can watch it there. And also, you can look through the past BSI Trust lecture series, a couple of other presentations there, including from Roberta Pearson, Ray Betzner, and Stephen Rothman. So it's worth checking out.
And the other thing you might be interested in checking out is your bank balance, because there have been a series of Sherlockian movie props at auction, including, friends, wait till you hear about this, the signed copy of Professor Moriarty's The Dynamics of an Asteroid had been up for bid at prop store auctions on November 17th. Now, that's the reasonably authentic signed copy, but I'm sure they have a provenance for it. And it was estimated at anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 British pounds. And at the current exchange rate, that would be anywhere from, say, $1,300 to $2,600. Well, it went unsold when the bidding didn't get to the reserve. It was used, of course, in the Game of Shadows, Sherlock Holmes, Game of Shadows, Robert Downey Jr., 2011. And there's also a sword from young Sherlock Holmes that was used by Nicholas Rowe in his battle at the end of that film in 1985, and that was estimated at 4,000 British pounds to 8,000 British pounds, which amazingly also did not sell. So if you're wondering what to do with all of that extra money, you can bundle it up and keep your eyes peeled for the next appearance of these things.
Yeah, we'll see if they drop the reserve on those. I guess Sherlockian swords are not as in vogue as they used to be.
No, I would be interested in bidding on Brigadier General Gerard's sword, but only if there's provenance for that.
Or, Basil Rathbone's sword from Robin Hood, for example.
Oh, yeah.
That would be a legendary.
Actually, I never didn't tell you this, but years ago at auction, I was lucky enough to buy from that old film, Robin Hood, Basil Rathbone's mustache. Which,
really?
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
what you've been wearing all these years?
Well, yeah, and unfortunately now it's gone gray. I don't know how that happened. Probably the sun.
So it was authentic. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, on the back of it, somebody had written "Love, Una." So
it's a signed mustache. It's what everyone needs. Yeah, that's how you know it's authentic. Well, before we close up the news bag here, we did have a couple of mail items that came in from our listeners. Brad Miller, in his missive to us answering the canonical couplet from the last episode, said, firstly, I have finally caught up to episode 300.
Oh.
I suppose congratulations are in order. Not to us or him. I don't know. In order from 1 to 300, in fact. Bravo, gentlemen, if I may be so bold as to use that term. I've begun this month not only catching up on a year's worth of iHos, but my annual reading of all things Sherlock Holmes I can get or have gotten my hands on. Original canon, pastiches, scholarly works, and this will continue through the end of January. I thank you, too, for making the start of that annual literary journey a good one, Brad Miller.
Oh, isn't that nice?
It is. And we also got one from Bangalore, India. Aman Bhargava writes, Hi, Scott and Bert. As you may know, Spotify Wrapped released a few days ago. I thought I'd share my podcasts Wrapped with you. I discovered iHose early this year and have been listening to it every day from the first episode since. It's become my favorite thing to do while on a run or at work. Living in India, I feel a distinct lack of a Sherlockian community and events. I've been a longtime Holmes fan since high school, but listening to your podcast, it is only now that my interest has taken a full plunge. Thanks for playing the game, and thanks for taking folks like me along. Best regards and wishes for the holiday season, Aman.
Oh, it's lovely. It's lovely. But surely there's, I know, don't call you Shirley, but surely there's Sherlockian doings afoot in India, thanks to the Scion Society there.
Yeah, is it the Bengal Tigers of India? Is that the name of the group? Or is it just the Sherlock Holmes Society of India? We're going to have to touch base with Jay Ganguly if she's in New York in January.
Yes. Yes.
I talked to her. And, of course, there is an expedition planned next year. The Sherlock Holmes Society of London, I think in collaboration with Jay's group, is doing a trip to India. Is that 2025 or 2026?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. I thought it was next year.
Okay. Next year has a way of creeping up on us all this time. So
yeah.
You know what? That would make a great idea for an episode. Talk about the planning for that trip, and I guess I've committed to us to it now that I've said it out loud.
Yes, you have. Now here it is. It is, in fact, in 2025. In fact, it's beginning soon, February 22nd to March 9th.
Oh, good. Goodness.
Sherlock Holmes in India, tailored for the Society by specialist tour operator Transindus. Not only visits the sites, but you'll enjoy special events relevant to the world of Sherlock Holmes. And you can find more about that at, we'll have the link in the show notes. It's maybe too late to sign up, but it is Sherlock Holmes in India 2025, brought to you by the Sherlock Holmes Society of London. And I will send you the link so you can put it in the show notes.
We'll do that. And that will do it from around these parts for Sherlockian news and correspondence. If you have something you think we should cover, send us a note and comment at ihearofsherlock.com. The holiday season is upon us, and 2024 is almost here, which makes it the perfect time to get over to mxpublishing.com and get yourself or someone you care about a 2024 page-a-day Sherlock Holmes calendar. Following the success of the 4 volumes of A Study in Illustrations by Mike Foy, an interesting collaboration surfaced between Mike and the best-selling Sherlock Holmes novelist and editor Richard Ryan. The result? This unique and fascinating page-a-day calendar that is perfect for Sherlockians. Each of the 366 days of 2024, yes, that's right, you get an extra day next year, features a different image and some quote from the canon, and an On This Day event. What a great way to celebrate Sherlock Holmes every day and be reminded of the timeless canonical influence in our lives. Stock is running low, so hurry and grab yours before they are gone. Get over to MX Publishing in the link in the show notes, and if you mention the code IHOSECAL, that's IHOSECAL, IHOSECAL, you'll get $5 off. That's an exclusive for I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere listeners. The 2024 Sherlock Holmes page-a-day calendar from MX Publishing. Put it on your shopping list today. Mike Baron is the creator of Nexus with artist Steve Rude and Badger, 2 of the longest-lasting independent superhero comics. Baron has won 2 Eisner Awards and an Inkpot Award, and he has written The Punisher, Flash, Deadman, and Star Wars, among many other titles. He's written for the Boston Phoenix, Boston Globe, Cream, Fusion, Oui, and Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine. He began crowdfunding with the Florida Man graphic novel, adapted from his novels. Next came Thin Blue Line, about 2 police officers trying to survive a night of rioting in a Midwest city. Following that was Private American, about a vigilante on the southern border. Mike Baron has written numerous novels, the Biker and Florida Man series, Helmet Head, Whack Job, and Banshees, which earned a starred review from Publishers Weekly. Together with New York Times best-selling author Blaine Pardoe, Baron has written Tenure, which will be released in January 2025. All of his self-published books can be found at baroncomics.com. Mike lives in Colorado with his wife Ann and 3 dogs. Mike Barron, welcome to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Thank you.
Well, let's begin at the beginning, as we do with all of our guests, and put the question to you, where did you first encounter Sherlock Holmes?
Oh, I was a kid. I picked him up as a curious youth would. I started reading all the classics at our local library, which was in Mitchell, South Dakota. And then later when we moved to Madison, Wisconsin, when I was in high school, they had a group of the Baker Street Irregulars there, which is a catch-all name for fans of Sherlock Holmes. And we would meet once a month to talk about the stories. And so my interest was piqued. And then about 3 years ago, I don't know why, but I suddenly decided to watch all the Sherlock Holmes movies that I could. And I probably saw a dozen of them before realizing that all the Sherlock Holmes movies added together would take about 100 years to watch. But I enjoyed most of them. Most of them were great. And of course, I formed strong feelings about who was the best Sherlock and who wasn't. But that got me into it. And then about a year ago, I got the idea, well, I could do a Sherlock Holmes story. And so I did.
Wow. So when you, there's a lot to unpack there, but when you viewed those dozen or so movies, was there any particular series or actor that you focused on? And who among them were your favorites?
Jeremy Brett is my favorite. I think he's the best Holmes ever. And of course, that was the BBC series that came out in the 80s. I thought he captured Holmes' personality more faithfully than any other actor. Secondly was Benedict Cumberbatch. I thought the reboot worked in the modern day, and I thought Cumberbatch's portrayal was also very insightful. And third was Basil Rathbone, who is the archetype of Holmes for everyone, and of course the model on whom our graphic novel is based. And you could shuffle those around at any time, and I could agree to any one of them being the best Holmes ever.
Yeah, well, I think you can't go wrong with any of them. And, it's interesting because over the years we've noted that every generation seems to have its Sherlock Holmes. There's so many people that we run into in the Baker Street Irregulars, of which we are both members, by the way, got their start with Basil Rathbone, with those, maybe they didn't see them live in the theater in the 40s, maybe they saw them in Saturday matinees on television or whatnot, but that was kind of a seminal moment. And of course, in the 1980s, as you said, the Jeremy Brett series really brought new life and faithfulness to the original character and the settings, the costumes, etc. It was really well done. And then the reboot, which brought a whole new generation of fans to Sherlock Holmes with Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman. So it's a nice range there that you've got.
Yeah.
I have a DVD set of Elementary, which is, of course, is the modern reboot that transposes Sherlock to New York and makes Lucy Liu his Dr. Watson. And I've watched a couple, and they're highly entertaining. But... they're missing it, in my opinion. They're just missing it. It's an interpretation and an homage, and it's very well done, and they're highly entertaining. But to me, it's just not Holmes.
Yeah, do you feel that you need that Victorian surround and the gas lamps for Sherlock
Not
Holmes?
Necessarily because of Cumberbatch.
Right.
But I do think we need an English accent at the very least. And I don't like race swapping and sex swapping. I think Dr. Watson should be a guy. I see there's a new series on Netflix now called Dr. Watson, and it's a black guy. I'll give it a shot. If it's got great writing, I'll stick with it.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting segue, great writing and characters. Because, you as a writer, you've touched and written so many interesting characters. What's your thinking about Holmes as a character, as a hero? I mean, can you relate Holmes, to some of the other work that you've done or some of the other huge characters that you've had a chance to work on and work with?
Well, I can relate to Holmes personally. A lot of people agree that he suffers from Asperger's syndrome, which, as you know, it interferes with a close emotional attachment to other people, which is often compensated for in some other field. And I think that that's true about Holmes. I don't know if Conan Doyle was even aware that he was doing that at the time. But Holmes learned to care about other people through his special skill, which was deduction, because he only came alive when he was working on a case. And then he came to care about his clients, especially if they were sympathetic. And my wife says I have Asperger's, and I suppose that I do to a certain degree. I think a lot of writers do.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've had an opportunity to talk to a whole spectrum of people who have written and been involved in things like Sherlock Holmes, and who deal with a different whole range of neurological and other kinds of conditions. But I'm interested.
But I have to say that no, I don't think I can't relate Holmes to any of my other characters, except possibly the Badger, which is a character I created in 1982, who's a multiple personality. But that's simply a different psychological condition, vastly different from what Holmes has.
It's interesting. Have you encountered in your network of fellow writers, other people who have touched Sherlock Holmes or thought about Holmes? The reason I ask is that I know that in the past, you've mentioned people like Carl Barks, the illustrator, and Philip Jose Farmer as influences on your own writing, and Philip Jose Farmer did a pastiche, I think, The Adventure of the Peerless Peer, about Sherlock Holmes. And I'm just curious if as part of your community or as part of your sort of surround, there's been other intersections with people who've done things on Sherlock Holmes.
You bet. I have a friend here in town. He's Ron Fortier, and he's the publisher of Airship 27, which is one of the biggest pulp factories in the country. And Ron has published a lot of Sherlock Holmes material, most of which he's written. There's also Paul Bishop. Paul was a Los Angeles detective with the LAPD for 30 years. He's a talented novelist and a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. And he's putting a book together now which consists of essays on a number of Sherlock Holmes pastiches, which is what they call a Sherlock Holmes novel not written by Conan Doyle. And I contributed an essay to it. It was about the Holmes Dracula file, which is the tone is perfect, but the emotional portrayal is way off the charts for what people expect from Sherlock Holmes. It's a good book. I recommend it, but be prepared to be shocked.
So, Mike, I'm interested because your career has spanned both traditional novels and graphic novels, and talk to us a little bit about the difference in writing for each. It seems to me that a graphic novel is almost like a screenplay, but I'd be interested to hear your take as someone who is a practitioner of it.
Yeah, I always say that the difference between writing a graphic novel and a novel is the difference between water skiing and skiing down Mount Everest. But, one of the bright spots in my life is I think I keep getting better as a writer, so I look forward to writing more. It used to be I was able to write 2 novels a year, and now I think I can write 3 or 4 novels a year, mostly because I have a friend who's pushing me to write faster and faster. But a novel is a completely different animal because you can touch on so much more than you can in a graphic novel. And that doesn't mean a graphic novel is shortchange entertainment. It's not. It depends on the writing. The writing is everything in any of this entertainment. In movies and TV shows, comics or novels, the writing is the key. You want to grab the reader by the throat and drag him into the narrative to the exclusion of all else. And by that I mean you want your reader to say, holy shit, what happens next? What happens next? And to keep turning the pages until he's done. And that takes a certain skill. You have to understand story to do that. But in a novel, there's so much more you can add to the milieu or to the narrative voice. For instance, when I have a character enter a scene, whether it's an established character or a new character, I ask myself, what does he see? What does he hear? What does he smell? What does he feel? So that I can dress the scene and make it realistic. Suspension of disbelief is key to all these entertainments, and you want the reader to believe that it's really happening. You want the reader to live the story and not even be aware of the words, at least in a novel. In a comic, you want him to be aware of the words and the graphics, because they produce a different effect. Words are very important to comics. I don't believe in wordless comics, and I have a bunch of them, and they take a short time to read, and they're beautiful. And yeah, it's a nice picture, but you never remember them. It's the words in context, but you can't use too many words. You have to dole those words out like gold coins. And people that cover a page with 100 words in 4 caption boxes, they don't understand the medium. It's the words in context that stick with you, and the first time you hear it in context, if it's good writing, it sticks with you. I think of Face Front True Believer, It's Clobberin' Time, In Darkest Day, In Brightest Light, No Evil Shall Escape My Sight. The first time those appeared, they had a tremendous impact, so much so that they keep resonating throughout comics right down through the ages. Which doesn't mean that you should write that. You should be original. You should strive for originality in everything you write. We're all unique human beings, so we necessarily bring our own life experience to what it is that we write. But even most importantly in a comic or a graphic novel is you want the dialogue to sound like real people talk. I can't say that often enough, and that's one of the biggest failings in most comics, is that you read it and you say, well, nobody talks like this. This guy is just recycling old Stan Lee, and that's not how people talk. It was great when Stan Lee did it, because it was the first time we saw it, and he set the tone. And I'll give you an example of that right now, because I have a collection of here, and I gotta just read you this one dialogue he wrote. Is Doc Doom and Mr. Fantastic are confronting each other. Hang on. Here we go. All right, and Doc Doom says, "Then turn and stare in abject awe at Doom the First, the new ruler of the world." And that's perfect for Doc Doom, but it's also wrong for everybody else. And people are still writing like that.
That's it's a terrific example. So I'm really curious, though. You're so eloquent about writing and about the importance of characters talking as people really speak. And your project, Sherlock Holmes Leviathan, links Sherlock Holmes with Captain Nemo and Jules Verne. And I'm curious, on the one hand, the character of Nemo is wonderful, but was there any baggage for you in looking at Jules Verne? Was Verne an important writer to you in your past when you were a kid? Or
Absolutely.
Now, talk a little bit about that. I mean, because I also, when I was a kid, I read through Alexandre Dumas and all the Jules Verne and all of that stuff.
I began my long slog through classic science fiction as a child, and I read everything I could get my hands on. Clifford Simic, Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, George Orwell, H.G. Wells. I devoured them all. And, of course, Jules Verne is right in there. I loved 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And one of the reasons I wrote this story was because Sherlock Holmes and Jules Verne both exist in that same time bubble of great Victorian characters whose lives overlapped. It's not a new idea. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is an example of somebody else using that idea. And of course, Philip Jose Farmer, as you pointed out, the Peerless Peer, and he also wrote Tarzan and Doc Savage, only he called them Lord Tiger and Doc Caliban. And he mixed them up with real characters like Sir Richard Burton and Mark Twain, and he created the Wold Newton universe where all these characters interact. And I admire that. Farmer's one of my favorite science fiction writers. And he has inspired me, along with a handful of other writers, probably more than anybody else. Although I'll read anything these days. These days I mostly read crime fiction when I read fiction. And I enjoy it very much, and I read a lot of historical books.
But what about the language? I mean, was that the only reason I ask is that, with my kids, having them just sort of touch on something, written by Verne, I was always dismayed to find it wasn't as immediately attractive to them as it was to me.
Yeah, that didn't bother me. And of course, if you're going to write Sherlock Holmes, you must follow Conan Doyle's style, which is the style of Victorian language, which and it has certain conventions. One is constant awareness of class differences. Another is circumlocution. You never touch on touchy subjects directly. You never say, well, he killed him with a butcher knife. You say the gentleman eliminated the fellow with kitchen cutlery or something like that. That's Victorian language. And if you want to write Sherlock Holmes, you got to get into that head frame and write it like that. Not necessarily Jules Verne. He had a different style of talking, but it was all 19th century, which was not as frank and vulgar as we talk today.
Yeah. Oh, definitely not. Wow. Well, what about the illustrations? I mean, what went on in terms of thinking through for Leviathan? The look and the feel and the characterization and the style. I mean, was that something that you devoted some attention to, or was that just
I
happen in a
give
different
very
way?
detailed instructions in my scripts, although they're not lengthy at all. They're sparse. I worked with Richard before. He did Private American, which I wrote to show people what Punisher should be doing. And he wanted to do Sherlock. And Richard Bonk is one of those very few artists who's both fast and good. But what surprised me about Sherlock was that Richard had been waiting his whole life to draw steampunk, and he didn't even know it until he started drawing it, and then he exploded. And you can see a hint of that in the video. The video can be found at baroncomics.com. We're very proud of our videos. Chris Brawley puts them together, and Chris is a genius. He's a professional videographer. But that gives you a good sample of the art style. And Rich, he just blew it out of the park. When people see this book, they're going to be stunned. So I write to my artist's strength. I asked Rich if he wanted to do Sherlock. He said, yeah. But we didn't realize that it would reveal this about him, about his ability to draw steampunk. So I'm creating another project for Richard, which is going to play directly to his strengths. Pat Broderick, the great artist who did Bronze Star, that came about because I said, Pat, what do you want to draw? And he said, I want to draw a supernatural Western, and that's how Bronze Star came about. I can write on virtually any subject if I can find a way into it as a story writer, and I usually can.
Now that's fantastic. So this collaboration between writer and illustrator. I mean, obviously you mentioned that you have your instructions that you have kind of laid out, but as you're working with Richard, is there anything that he gives back to you that makes you rethink how you've written it or what a scene might entail?
Richard is one of the most faithful artists I've ever worked with. he never mentions any problem with the script, because by the time I give him the script, I've been over it 45 times for every aspect. I make sure that the dialogue sounds natural, that the portrayals are consistent. It just wasn't always thus. I mean, there are books I wrote back in the 80s that I would just soon claw back out of the market. It took me a long time to write a novel because I'm a slow learner, but when I get it, and that's informed my graphic novel writing as well. And I'm pretty happy with my output for the past 20 years. I don't let anything out of the house unless I think it's a home run. And I've refined my writing to a degree where it snaps and pops on every page. And by that I mean it holds your interest. There's something there in every page, in every panel, that furthers the story and does it in an interesting way, which is what I think that most people should be doing who write fiction for a living.
From your mouth to God's ears. So this project is crowdfunded. It's you can find it on baroncomics.com, also on Indiegogo, fundmycomic.com, and Kickstarter. What's your experience been with crowdfunding before?
Well, sometimes you hit the jackpot and sometimes you don't. We hit the jackpot with Thin Blue Line a couple years ago, and the reason is when I announced a graphic novel about two police officers trying to survive the night in a riot-torn city, and that's all I said. And everybody knew what it was. They all knew it was inspired by the riots of 2020. The left attacked, calling me a racist, a homophobe, everything under the sun, what they usually do. And somehow Fox News got hold of that, and they had me on their morning show. And so that graphic novel went through the roof. The same thing happened when I announced Private American, because I was disgusted with what Punisher had done with the Marvel. With what Marvel had done with Punisher. They dragged him through the mud. They're embarrassed by him. They humiliated him. They cucked him. They did everything but just outright cancel him and completely remove him from their roster. Because the people who are in charge of Marvel now are not interested in entertainment. They're no longer in the entertainment business. I don't know what business they're in, but that's true not only of Marvel, but of so many film studios too, like Disney, for example. Their films don't seem to be entertaining or designed to entertain, to my mind. They seem designed to, quote, raise awareness, unquote, about one social problem after another, and that's fine. If you can work that into the story, it can be the stuff of a vital drama. Just look at The Grapes of Wrath and To Kill a Mockingbird. That's how you do it, because you care about the characters first and foremost, but nobody cares about these characters. So I announced that Private American, if I were writing him, and I did, is on the southern border, trying to stem the flow of human traffickers, drug smugglers, and terrorists that were pouring across the southern border unchecked and then being flown in the dead of night to cities all over the country that weren't even informed that they were coming. And as soon as that came out, a far-left hate site called the Daily Kos ran an article. Headline, Punisher creator Mike Baron releases another racist AF comic book. Now, first of all, I didn't create the Punisher. Jerry Conway did. And secondly, the person who wrote this, a purple-haired harridan, has never read anything I've written. And that was evident by her description of the book, because the book hadn't been released yet. So when it was finally done and lettered, we contacted the Daily Kos and said, would you like to see the book? And the response is, well, we can't stop you. So we sent them a link to the book online. That was 3 years ago. And as of today, they have not looked at it.
Well, we'll give people something to look at with regard to Sherlock Holmes Leviathan. Wonderful illustrations by Richard and some great panels by you. And as you say, the promotional video there, it's really worth checking out. And speaking of Disney, Mike, I couldn't help but notice it looks like Rich used the Disney version of the Nautilus as his inspiration, and I love that because it is so classically steampunk, and it immediately draws to mind people's visualization of what the submarine looked like.
Yeah, and I have that movie. I'll probably get around to it in the next couple of weeks and watch it again.
It's a great
throwback. Yeah.
So what's next, Mike? I mean, you're writing more novels now. You think your writing is getting better and better. Sherlock Holmes Leviathan is terrific. I mean, what are you thinking about for the future? More Sherlock Holmes?
Well, it's struggling, frankly, and the reason is that I should have known that comic book fans have a very parochial target area. They want superheroes, science fiction, horror, and tits. And Sherlock Holmes has none of those to offer except for a little science fiction. It's outside their parameters. It says, what is this? It is neither fish nor fowl. Well, it's Sherlock Holmes. And of course, it surprises me. There are a lot of people that aren't into Holmes, and a lot of them are in the comic community. I'm working on a couple of Nexus graphic novels with some world-class artists. I wish I could tell you who they are, but you're going to be excited when you learn about them. Pat Broderick is well into the second issue of Bronze Star, and his art is just mind-blowing. It's just mind-blowing for an artist of anyone's age, but at his age, to keep getting better and better and to do the greatest work of his career, it's just astonishing. And Pat's astonished at himself.
That's fantastic. Well, we will have links to baroncomics.com and all the places you can support this project, as well as to some of the items that we mentioned in Mike's bio in the introduction there. Mike Baron, thank you so much for telling your story and joining us here on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, thank you. You never know what you're going to find when you talk to highly creative people. And the thing that sticks with me from talking to Mike is that he's so articulate about storytelling and writing and about novels and about engaging readers. And his writing is engaging and thought-provoking, and he is a significant voice, and he's really a craftsman at what he does. And it's always interesting to talk to creative people. You never know where the conversation's going to go.
Yeah, and I was particularly taken by the way he described how it is writing for graphic novels versus traditional novels, and the importance of self-editing.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I've had more than enough experience in this area, first with 140 characters that Twitter gave us, and various media platforms. You learn to be economical with your words, unlike here. You need to be concise. You need to draw people's attention in. You need to accomplish something in a very short period of time or a small bit of space. Mm. And that, it takes practice, right? And it is absolutely one that you improve at over time, but you can really tell who the experts are versus who the novices are in that kind of practice. And it really makes a difference when it finally hits the printed page. It's A Chance of Listening with your correspondent, Madeline Quiñones.
Hello, everyone. I'm Madeline Quiñones, and today I'm here to talk about a podcast focused on the Granada TV series. No, not that one. As it turns out, the podcast that you're probably thinking of wasn't the first to cover the Granada series. That honor goes to A Study in Granada, started in 2018 by Mike Knoll and Jackson Eflin. Mike is a Sherlockian, and Jackson is just starting to get into both the show and the canon for the sake of the podcast. It's not the first Sherlockian podcast to have this dynamic of one host who knows more than the other, but that kind of dynamic certainly has its own entertainment value, especially if you, the listener, also know more than one of the hosts. It's like sharing a book or a movie with a friend and waiting for them to react to certain parts. The hosts would eventually cover a handful of other adaptations on the side, and ultimately stop short of covering the entire Granada production, stopping with the disappearance of Lady Frances Carfax in December 2022. Which is a shame, because this was a light, fun listen, and most episodes aren't even an hour long, so they're pretty easy to get through. If you want to give it a try, I recommend the first 2 episodes, which cover A Scandal in Bohemia and The Dancing Men. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go rewatch The Blue Carbuncle for the millionth time. Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, that's one of the lovely traditions I think we Sherlockians have around this time of the year. Of course, December 27th is officially Blue Carbuncle Day. But the entire holiday season seems an appropriate time to haul that out. You know, that I reread The Blue Carbuncle every year. I also reread Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol every year, just as part of that tradition of like getting in the holiday spirit and the literary spirit of the time.
Oh, I like that very much. Excellent. Very appropriate.
Yeah. Okay, that means it is everyone's favorite quiz show coming up here in the Sherlockian world. Of course, it's Canonical Couplet, where we give you 2 lines of poetry. We test your wits as we ask you to identify which Sherlock Holmes story it is that we're talking about. If you recall, around these parts, the last time, we gave you this clue. Of a great evil, Holmes unearthed the root. The game was undeniably afoot. Bert, I will leave this one to you. Do you know which story it is that we are talking about?
Yes, of course. It's a wonderful case. Holmes, of course, comes back from travels in France, associated with another case, with a recipe that he gives to Mrs. Hudson, but it doesn't turn out very well. It's the story about Mrs. Hudson's damaged creme caramel. Watson called it the crooked flan.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
See, I knew we'd come back to Shirley at some point.
I knew we'd get that in there.
The crooked flan. Wow.
Yeah.
No.
What?
No, you're not
Wrong
even the man
again.
in the gray flannel suit. No, Eric Deckers is going to help us out here.
Yay!
He's a little gun shy after having been off the last 2 times, and he says, "I'm hesitant to say that I've solved it, since I seem to have a history of providing the right answer to the wrong question. But I'll risk it and say that this is the story of the time that Holmes went undercover to work as an administrative assistant at a fashion magazine whose editor was killed with a deadly poison. It's the adventure of the Devil's Foot Wears Prada." Except the Prada brand wasn't created until 1913, so it's probably more likely the adventure of the Devil's Foot. But given my luck, it's A Scandal in Bohemia. Way to cover your bases there, Eric. No, yes, it was the Devil's Foot. So Thank you for that. We did throw a few people off, interestingly enough, who guessed the adventure of the Abbey Grange, which is where that phrase was uttered. But, of course, the foot we were looking at was the devil's kind. So, well, let's see, among the people who did respond correctly, who we will be picking to win the prize. So give the prize wheel here a big spin. Watching it go around and land on number what is that? 46. 46. Okay, and that looks like it is Joshua Harvey. Josh Harvey. And Josh writes, interestingly enough, he said, loved hearing more about my kids and my weekly listen of Sherlock & Co., which has become a tradition to and from Taekwondo. That's nice to know you're sharing that show with your kids, Josh.
That's great.
I would imagine he doesn't subject his kids to this show. That would be too cruel. But yes, Josh, we have something for you from the iHose Vaults. And I should mention, I don't know that he's gotten enough credit for it, but Josh is the maestro behind the theme to Madeline Quiñones' A Chance of Listening segment. That little jingle that you hear there was written for that program specifically by Josh.
Oh, nice.
So, and if you'd like, if you can't get enough of Josh Harvey, because we can't, he was actually on episode 259, Sketches of Science, where he talked with us about his creative process behind creating musical themes for a lot of these science societies that were having Zoom meetings during the pandemic. So they all had their little musical signature there. So, well, congratulations to you, Josh. And now for the clue for the next canonical couplet. Here we go. The words were said, and help came rather late. And listen to that preacher's Billingsgate. If you know the answer to this episode's canonical couplet, put it in an email addressed to comment@ihearofsherlock.com with canonical couplet in the subject line. If you are correct and your name is chosen at random, you will win a prize. Good luck. And that prize will be a copy of Mike Barron's Sherlock Holmes Leviathan. Well,
excellent.
Yeah,
excellent.
Should be fun. Well, we have one more show before the end of the season, Bert.
Hooray!
Be wrapping it up rather quickly, and then we rush into January.
Boo.
I think our first January episode of season 19 will drop while we are at the BSI weekend.
Oh, goodness.
So that should be interesting. Lots of fun, and we will welcome seeing any of our listeners during the BSI weekend. We certainly welcome you to come up and buy us a drink.
Yes, if you come up to me and mutter the secret word iHose in my ear, I will ask Scott to buy you a drink.
And I will have conveniently forgotten my wallet upstairs.
Oh, dear.
Well, whatever it is, we would delight in seeing you and chatting with you and hearing your feedback, maybe your ideas for what's to come. But I know we're looking forward to a great season ahead. And wishing you all of the best this holiday season, whether you celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, Festivus, or whatever it happens to be. We wish you all the best. The compliments of the season. And until next time, this is the holiday cheerful Scott Monty.
And I'm full of eggnog. I'm Bert Wolder.
And together we say... The games of foot.
The games of foot.
You know, I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I'm neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.